Hello and welcome to the Harryman Show number 52. We have the great Ryan Brown with his off-worldly chops. He currently plays in Dweezil Zappa band, and he's a current LA drummer too, and many other projects. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey, Dustin, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Dude, it's an honor, man. You're like one of those master drummers that, it's just great to talk to, along with other guests we've had on the show.
Oh man, well, thanks. I appreciate that. You've had a lot of awesome guests on the show, so I'm honored to be in company with those guys.
Yeah, and growing up, I was a big Zappa fan too. So I kind of heard some of your stories about collecting the records and kind of putting the songs together. But we'll get into that. So I do relate with the whole growing up and trying to hide the music from the parents and all that stuff too. So I thought that was a really cool thing.
Yeah, right.
So currently, you're in the Dweezil Zappa's band. You've been with them probably roughly about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. 8 years. Actually, next week it'll be 8 years.
Yeah, so 8 years is quite a big run there.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky. For me, this is my dream gig, and I still honestly have to pinch myself. And when we play shows, I sit on stage and I look at him, I look at the band, and playing this incredible music that I've listened to since I was a little kid, and I can't believe I'm in that position. I'm very lucky, and it's been a blast. And I've done like 479 shows.
Oh wow, that's quite a bit. Yeah. So, are you primarily just playing kit, or do you also do any kind of percussion in the band, or any kind of percussion recordings as well?
I do percussion stuff on recordings, but not live in the band. Uh-huh. I do have some interesting stuff on stage from time to time, including a lot of really cool stuff from Morph Beats. If you guys don't know Morph Beats, MORF. Morph Beats, you guys should check them out. They've got a lot of really awesome percussion stuff that we use from time to time. But primarily, it's all kit.
Nice. And then with your classical training, was that something that was kind of an easy way to kind of jump into, or did you kind of have to learn as you went with that stuff?
It was interesting how my kind of path took me. That was completely unintentional, but I was ready to do all the percussion stuff just because of my training kind of over the years and the teachers that I had and the bands that I played in, from concert band to orchestra and everything else. So
yeah, it definitely helps. And then growing up, obviously Zappa had many of the best drummers in the world. What were your couple favorites? I know that's kind of a broad question, but was there like a particular drummer that stood out that you kind of followed through his whole career that played with Zappa at one time?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a great question. So everybody that played with him is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the way I kind of got into him was I started playing drums when I was 11, and I got a subscription to Modern Drummer.
Oh, nice.
And you start reading Modern Drummer, and Drums and Drumming was another magazine that was out at the time that was one of my favorites. Mm. And every month there was always a mention of this guy, Frank Zappa. I had no idea who he was. Mm-hmm. And, I just remember every month, there's some article, Terry Bozzio played with Frank, Vinny Colaiuta, Chad Wackerman, Chester Thompson, Ainsley, Ralph Humphrey, all these guys. And so after a while, I thought, I should probably find out who this Frank Zappa guy is and check this out, because he's talked about in every single one of these magazines. Mm-hmm. And so the first record I bought, which was pretty random, was Terry Bozzio was on the cover of Modern Drummer, and it had a list of top records that he played on. Mm-hmm. And one of them was the Zappa in New York record, which is a live record. And I didn't know anything about Terry or Frank or any of this stuff yet. And I was about 13 at the time. And so I went down to the store and I bought Zappa in New York. And I did not know what to do with this record. I'd never heard anything like it.
Yeah.
And so the first song, as some of you know, is Titties and Beer, and there's a lot and I was listening to Huey Lewis and the News in the Cars, and I was just like, what like what is this?
Yeah the first one I heard, not to interrupt you, was Go Fuck Yourself, and I was like, what the fuck?
Right. There's a lot of moments like that, right? In the Frank catalog. So and so there's a lot of material like that on Zappa New York, and I was not ready. I didn't know how to process it. I was young, and so I remember listening to it, and I remember realizing that the musicianship was phenomenal, but I just wasn't ready, and so I kind of shelved it. And about a year later, which is another year of every month in Modern Drummer, they're talking about Frank Zappa and all these famous drummers, and I thought, well, it seems like there's a ton of records, and maybe I just didn't get the right one for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the store and completely randomly just looked up in the CD bin, just completely randomly got Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch, which is Chad Wackerman.
Nice.
So to answer it's a long way to answer your question, but for me, like my whole entry into the Frank Zappa world is Terry Bozzio.
Yeah.
So I'm very, that since he was my first, and it was the first thing that grabbed my ear, and then the second was Chad Wackerman, and so then I went like on a serious deep dive into both of those guys because they're the first two, and so drummers that played with Frank that I heard, and so I went crazy, and I found everything Terry has ever played on.
Nice.
And as much stuff as that Chad played on as possible, but since Terry was that first one, it holds a very special place for me. And of course, I love and adore all of them, but just because of the circumstances, that was kind of my initial entry point.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I want to take from that. At that time, that was probably the most modest drum kits that Bozzio was playing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that
right.
He was just more of like you could see what he was doing at the time when he was doing those one-handed rolls and those solos and stuff. And then I think after that he started kind of going into the his 80s, the big kit, the rototoms, all that. But one thing I have to say is I can tell you mirror your setup closer to what Chad did with the 3 rack toms and the stacks right on top of it. Am I overthinking that one?
That's a really good question, actually. So that the kit that I have with Dweezil is the minimum amount of stuff I need to play the songs like the record. So, and Frank wrote out a lot of the drum parts, right? And so there's a lot of, huge extended tom rolls, and the black page is written out note for note. And so what I have, and so it's interesting, right? So I didn't specifically model it after Chad's, and playing through these songs, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, so I got to have, I need to have 2 different kinds of chinas. I've got to have a splash. I got to have a bell, and so just slowly to replicate everything. That's kind of what I fell into. So yeah, but it's very, very similar to his for sure.
Now, as you were kind of coming up through your drumming career, were you having setups similar to that? Were you playing more of a standard like 4-piece?
I never had anything close to this ever.
Oh, okay.
Until I got this gig 8 years ago. I am a 4-piece guy. Like 1 rack, 1 floor, 2 crashes, ride, no splashes, no chinas, no belt, like none of that stuff. I've always been in that zone, and it took me a while to get used to this huge kit. Nice. Because I played since, like I said earlier, since I was 11, and then all of a sudden there's all this stuff, and it took a long time, like ergonomically, like to figure out, like, wait, okay, here's the spacing between these toms, and my second floor tom is too far out, outside on the right, and it took a while. And then the funny thing now is we go on the road, and so if I've been doing a whole bunch of in-town stuff for 4 or 5 months or whatever, and I don't play that kit, and I go back, it takes a while to reacclimate.
Yeah.
And then we get off the road, and then I start doing local stuff and go back to the 4-piece kit that I'm used to. It takes a while to reacclimate. And there's sometimes I'll go right after I get off the road on the 4-piece kit, and I'll go to hit a tom that's not there.
Oh, wow.
because my muscle memory for, if we do 4 or 5 shows in a run, and then my muscle memory says, oh, here's the tom. Nope.
Yeah, but it's got to be. It's got to make it a little easier for you bringing everything back in and playing a small setup after playing a big setup for a little bit too, though.
It is, yeah. Well, and ergonomically, it's just a completely different thing. So, So yeah, I never had, when I was a kid, I never had the massive set. I always had, the biggest was a 5 piece, and so it was really fun. And I never owned rototoms either. So
Oh,
you know,
nice.
I got the rototoms, I got the Zappa gig, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, I have one of these since I was 15. This is killer.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your training too. You actually you graduated from the jazz program in the Indiana University. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. And how long did you go there?
So I was there for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was one of the best decisions I've ever made
Nice.
in my life. It's just an absolutely fabulous school. It's the Jacobs School of Music, which is in Indiana University. And for me, it was the perfect training. And what originally drew me there were two things. I remember, because I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, and I remember looking for schools, and I wanted to find a school that had a working drummer teaching there.
Yeah.
And so I found, and there were still quite a few schools, of course, that fall under that umbrella. And I started there in 1994, and Kenny Aronoff was teaching there at the time, and that was a huge draw for me because he's one of the most successful drummers ever.
Yeah.
And always loved his playing, and he was a professor there.
Oh wow.
And so he was teaching all the drum set players, and then the jazz department in Indiana is just phenomenal. At the time, it was led by David Baker, who started the program years and years ago, and he was just one of the most amazing educators that I've ever been around. Mm-hmm. So then, at the same time, getting a jazz degree there, you had to do a whole bunch of orchestral percussion stuff also. So I had some amazing teachers like Wilbur England and Tom Stubbs, who was in the St. Louis Symphony. So it ended up being this perfect mix of every style of music.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
so it's right. So it's like I would study with Kenny, and he'd have us transcribing the new Melissa Etheridge record that he played on.
Yeah.
And then I go to lessons and play with that, and he help me with that. So there's like the rock stuff, and then with David Baker and Dominic Serra and Pat Harbison from the jazz department that were there, learning all this amazing jazz stuff, and then the orchestral stuff with those other guys and playing in concert bands and orchestras. So it's this incredible mix, which looking back on it now is interesting because it could not have prepared me any better for the Zappa gig, which is like a perfect mix of all this stuff.
Yeah, it feels like you got the holy trinity of education there.
Yes, I definitely did. Yeah, it was fantastic there.
And to pay a compliment to Kenny, he's probably one of the most realistic drummers I've ever seen. If that makes sense, I know
it does. Yeah.
So
sure,
everything he does means something when he plays. If that makes sense.
It definitely does. Yeah, for sure. And he's one of the most amazing motivators ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you ever met him in person?
No, I haven't, but I heard he's very uplifting.
He is unbelievable. Yeah, and so if you ever, so someday I'll introduce you to him. But if you ever meet him, he's the best. And if you ever want to, get really psyched up about something or feel really positive, there's no one better to go to in the world.
Yeah, and I've been reading about him in magazines since I was a kid, and he just he got over the partying and started worrying about his physical attributes to the kit, and kind of transformed his playing. So I'm kind of familiar with his educational side of it too. He's a monster when it comes to the breathing, the technique, and all that.
He is. Yeah, he actually went to Indiana University also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he studied orchestral percussion there actually, and was a timpanist and played four mallet stuff, and a lot of people don't know that about him. So he comes from that whole thing, but no one knows that. Everybody knows him as this incredible guy who's played with everybody and is always on the road with John Fogerty and everything. But he has a whole other side.
Yeah, I think Mellencamp kind of put his face on the front of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah, yes, and that's a compliment. But I'm just saying, I think that's kind of what can commercialize them a little bit as far as being recognized. But I wanted, Was it really daunting to you to learn all that stuff, or were you excited about it? Some kids at that age kind of feel like it's overwhelming, or did you feel like you just wanted to take it all in?
Yeah, I wanted to take it all in, and I practiced all day, every day. and I remember just going there thinking, okay, like I'm ready. It's on. Let's do this. And the thing too, you don't realize at the time, and for anybody listening that's younger, in college or getting ready to go to college, is to have that opportunity to where you can practice 24/7 is phenomenal. Nice. And you don't have to worry about anything else. It's a really unique time. And I just remember, every teacher, I remember just thinking, just give me more information. What can I, practice more of to try to get better? And I loved it. And for me, I really, felt like it was the perfect environment for my style of learning.
That brings me to my next point. Playing with someone like Dweezil Zappa, you can't miss a note or hide a note. So having your chart reading skills have to be on point, and that's something I've noticed you're great with. What is your best techniques for breaking down the old Zappa and the new Zappa stuff? And do you chart it out, or you kind of just write it out yourself?
Okay, so I've done. I was counting at one point in time, but I've done like over 200 Frank Zappa songs with Dweezil. So it's on the song, and I'll start with that because there are some things that are written out that we have the actual charts for. Now, of those 200, it's a very, very small number. I'd say it's probably around 15 or so.
Yeah.
So and it's interesting because talking to people after shows and before I got in the band, I remember thinking, I'm sure there's charts for every single one of these, and there's not.
Yeah.
So those 15 or so, it's just, practicing it just like you would, you practice reading charts. But the other ones, and I talk about this to my students all the time, is even if you don't end up reading charts, you will write charts every single day. Mm-hmm. And so I have a whole formula for charting out tunes. So for all those other tunes and anything, local here in LA or whatever, I have a whole system for charting out a song. And it starts with writing out the form of the song. Mm-hmm. And so basically, what I'll do is, and I'm sort of in a unique position because I've listened to the whole Frank catalog since I was a kid.
So that helps.
and so, right, which is huge. Yes. Yeah. And I've talked about this with a lot of other drummers. For me, I just know the material. I know it because I've listened to it so many times over the years and played along with it. But even so, even if it's a song I think, I know this. There's a big difference between thinking you know a song and then getting in there and playing it with the recording, like in your practice room, versus leading a band through it.
Absolutely.
So there's a huge difference, especially when it's all like a whole bunch of different time signatures going by in a row, and you have to set it up to land on one after 7 bars of 1916 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a big difference between those things. So what I do is I chart them all out, even if I think I really, really know them, just so I can get in my head. Mm-hmm. And the first thing, like I mentioned, is the form chart. So I'll write out, the sections of the song, whether it's, like intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, or if it's a complicated, more orchestrally kind of piece or jazz piece, I'll use A, B, C, D. And then I'll just I'll figure out the time signature and write out how many bars of each time signature there are. Mm-hmm. And then once I see that on paper, then it's way easier for me to internalize that so I can lead a band through it. Right.
Yeah.
And so
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And this is a silly question. Are you doing this with the click as well?
Okay. So that's like the thing that everyone asks after shows. I'm not, I do it with the recording.
Nice.
And here's why, because there's so many versions of a lot of these Frank Zappa songs. And so Dweezil, and I love this so much, Dweezil's very specific. He'll say, okay, we're going to do, let's say Cruisin' for Burgers, but we're going to do the version from Zappa in New York. Or we're going to do Cosmic Debris, and we're going to do this specific version of Cosmic Debris. And it might even be off of a bootleg.
Oh, wow.
Or some show that he found on YouTube.
Jeez.
And so all of these, there's so many different versions of the songs, and they're all at different tempos, and a lot of them are different drummers playing on it from different eras, and so there's different fills. And so I don't do it to a click. What he does is he actually makes a show file that's roughly 3 hours long, and he sends us an email with all of the versions that he wants in a row, and then sends us an audio. Yeah, right. And then and then great to reference. And then there's an audio file about 3 hours long, and then has all of them in a row.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Then it makes it great to practice to. So then I'll go over to my room, I'll chart them out, and then I'll just play with those versions of the song. Because in some of them, they push here and they pull here, and it goes chorus, and it's faster, and it drops into the second verse. It's slower, and than the first verse is. And so I really spend a lot of time trying to map in my brain exactly how it feels to match these specific recordings.
Yeah, that's really cool. He does that, so it's almost like it's going to help your memorization as well too, going into it, because you just already set, everything's set to the ground. That I can see how that totally help.
It definitely does. And then once we have that kind of framework, then stuff can, and then once we get those down, then stuff can move.
Yeah.
Then, he can say, okay, well, we're going to add this thing in here, at this point, or, we're going to, I found this really cool line that he did in a rehearsal for, whatever record. I really like this line. We're going to insert that 2 bars before the chorus in this song. So once we have that framework, then we can tinker with stuff.
Now,
a little bit.
You've been with the band for a while now. Does he let you have free reins when it comes to writing new stuff, or does he kind of coach you through it and tell you what he wants, and you kind of just mimic that?
So since he sends out this file, and everybody in the band spends a lot of time going through all this stuff. As long, and he knows that we're all going to, everybody in the band's going to make it sound as close to the record as possible, as close to the recording that he sends. Might not be on a record, but
no, I mean as far as writing new material.
Oh, sorry. I think maybe you cut out for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And no, it's all good. For him writing new material.
Yeah. Does he let you guys kind of go ham with it, or just did he kind of does the same thing where he structures it out for you guys?
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, so for him writing new material, it's interesting because I've been in the studio with him. I'm very quickly reminded. I'm like, wow, you are Frank Zappa's son. and he, there's a lot of moments where he's like, okay, you do this, you sing this, and then it all comes together. And I'm like, what? I'm like, wow, like I never would have thought of doing it that way. So he's very specific about parts that he wants. And but then within that, and his dad was this way too. He's going from different band and different in our case, different drummer to different drummer. Dweezil's the same way, where he knows what each person is really good at and very comfortable with. And then there's definitely some free rein that comes out of that.
Yeah.
But the initial framework of stuff, no, it's very specific. It's not written out, but it's it's a very specific thing.
And was that the album you guys were touring with in 2020 before everything kind of got shut down? The Rats album.
Yeah. So the Hot Rats record.
Yeah.
There was the Frank record. And, we were doing that front to back, and nice. It was so much fun. It's so much fun doing that.
So I want to talk about what you currently do in LA. I know you're one of the main instructors at MI. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, I love teaching, and I've been there for 10 years.
Oh wow, I didn't know you were there that
now.
long.
And then I did some classes and stuff before that time, but I've been there for quite a while, and it's a fantastic place. I love it there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of people come and go though. But is it fun or inspiring to kind of see people launch their careers from there as well?
Oh yeah. Oh, there's nothing better than that. It's great when you have students come through and then they're on Saturday Night Live.
Oh wow.
And then you watch, and I'm like, I'm standing in front of my TV, just going, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm so happy for them. Or like a student, I was playing with Big Sean and was opening for Rihanna at Wembley Stadium.
Oh wow.
And we're writing, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, and like I love when anybody, is, working hard and gets the success that they deserve. It's unbelievably rewarding. I'm very happy for all of those, everybody that's, out there doing so well.
Now, I know you do clinics there as well. Do you kind of work through your own formula, or do you work through the school's formula to teach?
So for the clinics and stuff, I do my own
Hmm.
thing, and actually, I have another one coming up. As a matter of fact,
Oh, nice! I'm looking forward to it.
for the clinics, I do those, kind of based around whatever I want. But there's a whole curriculum there that I helped, along with a number of other guys, help rewrite. I rewrote one of the reading curriculums, and so if it's a class, then it's all based on preset things. And of course, I can interject my own little things related to Frank Zappa
Yeah.
or whatever
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in the middle. But the clinics are great because I can kind of have free reign to do what I want.
Yeah. And obviously, you're kind of aware with the situation. What are some of your favorite studios that kind of work out in the LA area of?
And there's an awesome place that I've been going to for the last few months. So I think it's actually going to shut down. But my
Oh man, that sucks.
got a few go tos around here. My all time favorite was also bought out by the drummer, or no, not the drummer. I believe it's the keyboard player from that the band X Japan.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of home studios I end up going to.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many places here over the years. Clear Lake Audio is right by me, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of room here.
Nice. And the thing is that's one thing that I think the pandemic did probably shifted in a positive way. It's kind of like the upbringing of all these home studios kind of popping up everywhere too. And obviously, technology kind of cushions that too. Do you see that as a positive or more of a negative in your position or opinion? I mean,
I think it's a great way for everybody to stay creative,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And they can do it at home,
Mm-hmm.
and and maybe more people are even being more creative now because of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And being home. So yeah, I mean, I know it's really hard for a lot of the the big companies because of everything happening. They couldn't go in, and people couldn't go in and work there, and it's been difficult on them. But I think it's all in all, if everybody's being creative and having a good time and making music and doing collaborations with other people, I think it's great. And then they can do stuff at home, send it to anywhere around the world, and have somebody else work on it. And I think it's kind of propelled that aspect maybe a little bit further than it was before.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Right.
And you recently did some guest appearances on albums such as like Hannah Montana and many others. How did those come about?
Yeah, those are super fun. So they're I've done a lot of session stuff here in LA. So I moved here in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way it worked for me, and it's interesting because everybody has a different story, but I started going out and meeting people and going to clubs and talking to different people and responding to ads for people that are looking for drummers, and slowly once you start kind of being out and seeing different people
Mm-hmm.
and playing in different bands, and then other people see you play, and then slowly people will say, hey, like after a show like at the Whiskey or wherever, somebody will come up to you and say, hey, I really like how you play. You want to come back and to my place? I've got next week sometime. I've got a session going on. I think you'd be great for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then slowly it just kind of spreads from there.
Yeah.
You start to meet a whole bunch of different people. And so, the Hannah Montana and a bunch of other stuff I ended up doing with an amazing producer named Marty Fredrickson that I met through another amazing producer named Michael Reed.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with those guys for a long, long time. And it just comes from meeting people around town. But I absolutely love doing the studio thing. I love all styles of music. I just love to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what it is. And it's always a fun experience.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've all been missing about the last year and a half is that whole networking in person, though. But then again, social media has also helped with that, and on the downfall of it too as well.
Yeah, right. Like the social media thing has been amazing.
Yeah,
for everybody over the last year.
Yeah. So, and I kind of want to talk about: are you giving private lessons as well online?
I do. I have a room here. So, I live in Burbank, and I have a room right by me in North Hollywood.
Okay.
A drum room that I share with a couple of drummers. And I teach lessons out of there.
All right.
I do the online thing, and yeah.
What's the best way to reach you if we want to take lessons with you?
You can shoot me an email, or you can go to my website. My website is ryanbrowndrums.com.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my email is ryanbrowndrums@gmail.com. Yeah, if anybody wants to do that, that would be awesome. And I have actually a MI masterclass, an online masterclass that's open to the public that's coming up on May 7th.
Oh, nice.
Which will be really fun. And I'll post about that. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and everything, and I always post about all that kind of stuff too. So
nice.
Yeah, if anybody ever wants to get in touch or talk about Zappa drummers or anything at all,
well, I highly recommend it too, and I'll definitely share the links there. Yeah. But what if I were going to take a lesson? What would be the books you teach out, or the books to prep with there?
Well, so it's interesting. My favorite book still to this day, after doing this for so long, is still Advanced Funk Studies by Rick Latham.
Oh, nice.
I just love that book.
The big yellow book.
Yeah, right. and my teacher had me doing that in Denver. Dave Robinette was my teacher growing up, and he had me out of that book when I was a kid. And it's funny because years later, I would be on gigs, not funky gigs at all, but just any kind of gig, and people would say, other people in the band would say, "Man, I really can hear you subdividing, and the time feels good to me because I can hear you. I can kind of feel the notes in between the notes." Mm-hmm. And honestly, it took me a couple of years after people saying that. I remember thinking, why? How do I do that? Like, why do I do that? Where does that come from? And then one day it just hit me. I was like, it totally goes back to me doing the Advanced Funk Studies book when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I've always just loved that book. But there's so many great books, especially now, right?
Yeah. And what are the best genres you kind of focus on? Is it more like jazz and funk and rock, or are you just kind of all over the place with teaching?
All over the place. Anything anybody wants to do, anything anybody wants to learn.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not many people can say that. yeah. So that's pretty good attribute there. Yeah, definitely. I would love to share those links and kind of promote that for you. Now,
thank you.
I know we kind of touched base on this already, but gear. I know going into the Zappa thing, you're playing the DW set. Was DW kind of your staple before that, or you just getting into it around that time?
Yeah. So I bought my first DW kit November 7th, 1991.
Oh, wow. You're the OG DW. That's like an old OG DW right there.
OG, yeah. It was before they didn't even make their own shells then. They were Keller shells.
Yeah. I actually have one of those.
Oh, do you really? Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if everybody's wondering why I know the date, I remember the date because I was in high school and I'd saved up every dime that I'd made for years.
Wow.
And I remember the date so well because I spent all the money I had.
And I'm guessing, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I'm guessing you probably spent around $2,700 to $3,500 even at that time.
Yeah, you know what? I don't even remember specifically. Well, and I didn't buy hardware either. I bought the shell. It was a gorgeous, I still have it. It's a gorgeous natural maple kit. 12, 14, 16, 22, no snare drum. No, and no hardware. I already had the hardware from my previous 1965 Slingerland kit that my dad and I found from the Rocky Mountain News.
Oh, wow.
In the classified ads. So I don't remember. I'll have to try and figure that out. I probably still have the receipt laying around somewhere.
No, it's irrelevant. I just remembered my first DW. I had to save my pennies too, and I understand how it goes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's a big investment. So I go. It goes back for me to that. Like I've been in love with them since high school. So that one in '91. I remember getting the first catalog, the first DW catalog I had. That was there were only a few pictures inside of people. I remember it was like Jim Kellner, Tommy Lee, Jason Bonham.
Yep.
in the original catalog. And so I've always been just in love with DW forever. And then I eventually added on to that kit. Mm-hmm. And I remember what was so cool is because I wanted to get jazz sizes to match the natural maple.
Nice.
And I called my drum shop, Rupp's Drums in Denver. Anybody in Denver knows Rupp's Drums? I remember I called Bob Rupp, and he was like, yeah, well, let me have them call you and try and match it And then John Good, the head, one of the two guys that's the head of DW, called me, and I was not no one in the world knew who I was. Yeah. I was just somebody who wanted to add on, and it didn't matter. He was like, "Hey, I want to get the exact match for those drums."
Oh, wow.
And I was already in love with the company. And then when that happened, I was thinking, well, it's the greatest company ever. And John's the greatest guy, and his attention to detail and how much he cares about everybody is incredible. And so, and since then I've had a few other DW kits, and then I never endorsed them or anything. I just always had only DW kits since then. And then I got this gig, and I called them. I was like, "Hey, I got this gig," and I was very, very, very lucky. And then they were like, "Oh, that's amazing! Congratulations! Welcome to the DW family."
Oh, so, wow! So that must have been just like a lifetime achievement to you on the way too.
It 100% was. I remember where I was when I talked to them on the phone when they called me to tell me that. So, yeah.
So you're currently playing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but more of like the burl style, more of an exotic finish right now.
So I've got a oyster glass finish.
Okay, I must have been watching something else, but
there's a few different ones. There's an older champagne sparkle that I played forever, and then I got a new one for the Hot Rap tour because Dweezil and I wanted to find a kit that sounded more like 1969 when the record came out. So I called John Good and said, "Hey, we want to have something that sounds more like Hot Rap." And he thought about it for a couple minutes, and he was like, "I know exactly what you need. You need a contemporary classic kit."
Oh, wow.
He was like, that'll match that sound. And actually, a lot of people don't know this. John Good from DW was Chad Wackerman's drum tech when he played with Frank Zappa.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that for years.
Yeah, that's pretty badass, dude.
That's some serious insider info.
It's like a full circle thing on that one.
It's right. It's crazy. So whenever I go up to Oxnard, California, where DW is, John has Frank Zappa stories for days because he worked with him for years with Chad.
Oh, wow! So he really has like the actual sound in his head of the real thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And so he knew it. He knew there's no one better to ask, right? Because he was on the road with Frank for years. Knows all the records. And I told him, like I said, he thought about it for a couple minutes. He was like, contemporary classic. That's the one.
Oh, wow. And is that
I got this.
Is that a solid maple shell, or is it mixed with anything?
So it's mixed. It's poplar and mahogany. It's a 7-ply poplar mahogany, and there's a maple reinforcing ring in it. So it sounds completely different than the champagne sparkle kit I had before, which I also love. I've had that kit since 2004, and that's a collector's series maple. So it's all maple. So this is completely different, and equally as awesome. Just a different beast. But he knew immediately because of that, because of his Frank Zappa connection.
Now, are you still playing more of the fusion setup still with those drums as well?
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Now, what I did do that was fun was I actually looked up old catalogs from 1969 online.
Yeah, that's stuff I do. I actually collect those as well myself.
Oh, do you really? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I literally have a whole library of just old catalogs I just go through and have nostalgia with here and there.
Oh, that's great! It's so fun, right?
Yeah.
Like to check out everything.
Well, even the Casio, or I can't say even like the wholesale manufacturer ones are just fun to look at.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I remember those for sure.
I know that's like great. Level 9 drum dork, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I love this. I love this so much. Somewhere in my parents' house in Denver, I still have all the drum catalogs from like 1987 to 94, which I need to find sometime.
I still have every single Modern Drummer and drum magazines I've ever bought.
So do I. Awesome. Yeah.
All right, I feel better about myself.
but much to my wife's chagrin, is there's just boxes and boxes of these things in the garage.
Yeah.
But every now and then I'm like, hey, I'm just go out and just pull one out, right?
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'll read about Chad Smith for about 2 hours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's so much fun.
Sorry to go on a tangent there, but yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No. I love it. So so what I did once I decided on the contemporary classic for the sound, then I was thinking about sizes of drums to get, and so I wanted to get sizes that matched what was available for somebody to buy in '69. And there's a bunch of drummers on Hot Rap, so there's it's probably a bunch of different manufacturers of drum kits. So I looked at the Slingerland and the Ludwig site and Gretsch. And so what I did was I matched the sizes of my new kit to the exact dimensions that they made in 1969. And the only liberty I took was in the bass drum. The bass drums, if it was a 22, it was 14 inches deep, and across the board in all those catalogs. And I made it 16 inches deep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But the depths of all the toms, I matched it directly to match the Hot Rap era, to try to get to even more capture that sound.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and then were you also kind of mimicking it with cymbals too? I know you're a Sabian guy. I don't know if you've been as long with them as you've been W, but were you playing bigger Sabian crashes or smaller Sabian crashes?
So it's interesting because we do Hot Rap, which is like 45 minutes, and then there's another like hour and a half or more, depending on the night, of material that's not from that era, right? So I had a very similar cymbal setup, and I honestly was hitting everything different, which is a huge thing. And I used different size sticks, which also makes everything sound different. Really trying as much as I could to make it sound more like that era. So I have a huge. I played Sabian for years and years, going back to high school also.
Oh wow.
But I have a crazy mix of stuff from Legacy, Evolution, Paragon, AA, HHX. And so most of them stayed the same. I changed my ride cymbal out, but a big thing was just hitting it and touch, because in 1969 nobody was bashing, right? So I hit differently, and I used smaller sticks.
Oh, it's kind of weird, because it's a concept that everyone thinks everyone hit harder back then. I think John Bonham kind of internalized that, but nobody was hitting as hard as they hit now. So that's the truth of it.
Right. Yeah. And if you look at video from that era, which is great now, because YouTube, you just go on and search anybody and check it out. And if you watch a video of Ainsley Dunbar playing, or whoever it is from that era, and just watch how they hit. And so that's been a big thing for me, playing all the Zappa material. Is I've even way before I got the gig, I've devoted my life to Frank, and I have all the records, and my room was wallpapered with Frank Zappa posters and all this stuff. And I've spent all this time watching these drummers play, and a huge thing to me is mimicking how everybody moves and what their posture is. And so I know if I'm going to play like a Terry Bozzio song, I'll try to make my body and mindset kind of more Terry.
Yeah.
Versus if I'm going to do like a Ralph Humphrey song, and he sits different and is super relaxed. And so I'll try, and I'll take a huge breath on stage. I'm like, okay, this is, whatever Ralph's song is, I'll just try and make myself physically look, as close to him as possible. And what I've found from listening to recordings, because we record every show and then listen to it on the bus after the show.
Oh, wow.
And so what I've found from listening to it and then trying something the next night and trying something the next night is, no one's ever going to sound exactly like somebody, right?
No.
But I feel like I sound 25% more like somebody if I make my body mimic their movements more.
Yeah, you're kind of taking on the persona too.
Yeah, right. And the way I started to get into that was through a couple of different guys. One was Dennis Chambers, seeing Dennis Chambers play years ago, and just watching how he never really moved his torso.
No, he kind of just looks like he's hopping a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah. So it's so interesting. Like, no one else plays like that. And I remember seeing him. I remember going back to my room when I saw him years and years ago, and then trying to do that. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then one of my all-time favorite bands, King's X, and Jerry Gaskill from King's X. There's another guy that I played along with those records for years, and then I went to see King's X the first time, probably 20 years ago, and I saw him play, and I was like, wow, like that's not at all in my head how I was doing it. And I remember trying to make my body movements mimic Jerry's more, and I remember thinking, I sound 25% more like him now.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of got way into that whole aspect of that.
Nice. And then, are you kind of you're going for that old sound? Are you miking the kit like a traditional style with big condensers on top, or are you using kind of like more internal mics for a live show?
So there's no internals. That's a good question. And our sound guy is amazing and spends a ton of time picking out the right mics. And then a newer thing to me, at least, is the programs that he uses. Iran is his name, and he works for Waves Audio, and they have a bunch of amazing plugins. So Iran and Dweezil have looked and found whatever the console was at the studio where they recorded Hot Rap.
Oh, wow.
And so then he has a plugin that makes everything coming, right? It's crazy. It makes everything coming out to front of house sound like it's being run through whatever said console is.
Oh, geez. That's
And so to answer your question, it's less about the actual mic and way more about him. And like when we're rehearsing, he is doing a ton of stuff and referencing the original recording, and then he has a different scene, as it's called, set for every single song.
Yeah,
that's
why I was
try
to pay credit to that, because if you have modern day mics, you would lose all that sound and that you're going for, and you're kind of just in the mixes there.
Yeah, right. And it's fun actually playing if we do like a segue, and I'm looking out, everybody in the house, mm-hmm. and there's a little light on him, and I can see him with his hand in the air, waiting for me to hit the downbeat of the next song. As soon as we hit the next song, it's fun. I always watch him, and he like boom, and he hits next song, and then boom, it goes to another scene, and the drums might completely change. Guitar tone will completely change. Whatever it is, to try to match that. So I mentioned that show file earlier, and all the musicians trying to match everything performance-wise. Iran is doing it all from an audio standpoint.
Yeah, so he's also like another member of the band too.
He 100% is another member of the band.
Yeah. That's an art in itself. I think it loses a lot of credit. It's well deserved.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, he and everybody else who does that is amazing. You're right. Like no one in the, not no one, but a lot of people in the house, especially non-musicians, might not realize like how unbelievably important.
It's like one of the main arteries in the whole presentation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
Now, I know this is kind of another silly question, but due to everyone kind of being slowed down, when do you guys think you're going to be back on the road, in your opinion?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah, I know. It's hard to answer that. I apologize for that, but I always like to.
Oh no, don't apologize at all. So I think we're in a unique position compared to other bands. It's right. It's like every band's kind of a different spot. So we normally do 1,000 to 2,000 seat indoor venues, mm-hmm. and in indoor, like we'll occasionally do an outdoor venue, but 99% of the time, especially in the States, it's indoor. And that's going to be a while. And then once those do open up to where it gets back to being full capacity, mm-hmm. and from what I've heard from everybody in the camp is that they're going to wait until it gets back to being full capacity. So I think right now they're shooting for like a year from now, probably.
Yeah, that would be my best guess too. And honestly, I would love to come see. I was telling you before the show, I saw Zappa play Zappa, and it kind of blew my mind. I think that was about 2006, 2007, where it had Bozio on drums. And that was like, whoa. I mean, I recommend anyone see that, musician or non-musician. That was one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life.
I saw it also. I never thought I'd be in the band. Like I thought I went as a fan.
Yeah.
I saw it here in LA. It was amazing. There's a DVD everybody can check out. And then it's funny because my memory of that show here, which was probably close to the time of when you saw it, but Bozio tore his bicep muscle. Yeah,
he played the whole show with one arm.
With one arm. And I was just like, as if he couldn't be more superhuman. And then I remember, I'm sure he did for your show too. I remember him holding up his arm and his bicep was just like black.
Yeah.
Like from like blood, like inside of his arm. I was just like, oh my God.
At first I thought he was doing it just to kind of like mess around. But then I saw he was serious. But that was the first time I ever seen Bosio actually get up and sing a song and play drums, and I was like, "What is going on?" You know. And I was about 17 or 18 years old when that happened. I was like, "Man, I've been missing out on a lot of this stuff." You know, and I just started diving in deeper and deeper from there.
Oh yeah, it's so amazing. And if you haven't seen it, check out the Baby Snakes DVD.
Okay.
The video with Bozio, and it's just like it's literally life altering.
Yeah.
and that's actually what I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but that's one of the things when I play a Bozio tune, I see him in that video, and I try to be him, and he looks crazy. He looks like he has rabies, and he's like just going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, he just looks like he's still fluent. You know, like it's not even that hard for him.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's so many great Zappa DVDs. There's the new documentary that just came out.
Oh, okay.
And there's a whole bunch of performance things. If anybody listening hasn't checked out Frank Zappa, just go online. There's so much stuff. And the unbelievable thing to me still after all these years is so when Frank passed away, he was 52.
That's pretty young.
And he sadly died from prostate cancer. So he was only 52 and by the time he passed away, he had released 62 records.
Jeez.
And the first record came out when he was 26. So that means he released 62 records in 26 years.
Wow.
And there's like file cabinets full of music that was never performed, never recorded.
Uh-huh.
And there's tons and tons of tapes in the vault of stuff that they haven't released.
Wow.
And so now they're up to over 100 total releases. But he was the most prolific guy ever.
Yeah.
And it's literally mind blowing. So my point is there's so much material. And I have a lot of people say this to me a lot. They're like, yeah, I checked something out and I didn't really dig it. And I'm like, well, what did you check out? Because there's so many different eras of different things to check out. So, yeah, and anybody listening, feel free anytime to hit me up on social media or wherever and write me and be like, hey, what should I check out? Or I checked this out. I really loved it. What else should I get? Or I checked this out. I didn't really dig it. What do you think I should try next?
Yeah,
I guarantee you there's something that you'll find and you'll flip out over.
Yeah, I think we have similar stories getting into it because I just didn't really know where to start with it. And it felt like, I guess, shock rock when the first song I heard. But yeah, once I started kind of getting into it, I'm like, oh, I get it now. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that one.
It's interesting, right? And then like the way after playing with him for the last 8 years and, being 100% immersed in it, it's kind of the way I kind of put it now is it's like Frank Zappa wrote orchestral music, but for rock band instrumentation. Mm-hmm. So I feel that way a lot of the times. It'll go into stuff where it's like all rock or, more all jazz or whatever it is. It's kind of like there's no way to generalize it, but kind of an overarching thing is it's like, orchestral music, complicated music, but instead of being written for a string quartet or, as a piano concerto, it's written for, guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, sax,
Yeah. Yeah, he was definitely ahead of and behind his time, if that makes sense too.
Yeah, it's just mind blowing still, and that's one of the fun things of the many fun things about being in the band is there's so much material we could play for the next 40 years and rarely repeat songs.
Yeah, that's another rare setting there too.
But then to what you said earlier too, I think because of the pandemic and everything going on, Dweezil's been working on some stuff too, and it's also equally as fun working on his solo stuff. So,
well, yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out when you guys do that. But Ryan, I know you're a busy guy and a couple of things going on today. But it's been a real honor, and I feel like we got to have you back on again at least a couple more times because I feel like,
oh man, that'd be awesome.
I feel like we didn't scratch the surface on some of the stuff we could have talked about, but I just want to thank you, and yeah, hopefully you'll come back on and we'll talk about when you're actually back on the road, and I'll be out there to see you guys as well too.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really been great chatting with you. And to anybody out there listening, thanks for checking it out. Listen to Frank Zappa. Check out Frank Zappa. And like I said, feel free to hit me up, with any questions, or if anybody wants to take lessons, or just has any questions about time signatures or whatever. So.
And what was the best way to do that? What was your email again?
So yes, Ryan Brown Drums, DRUMS @gmail.com.
Okay, that's pretty easy.
And then my website is ryanbrowndrums.com.
Nice. Oh well, Ryan,
so,
I'll definitely share those links and we'll get you going. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
No problem.